Well, good afternoon, everyone. With regard to the refugee crisis, it's pretty obvious that ISIL is not contained, and it's pretty obvious they're not the JV team. This is a serious threat. The president still has not laid out a strategy for dealing with this. In the wake of this mass casualty attack in Paris, hopefully not only our own administration may wake up, but NATO may take an enhanced interest in dealing with this problem. We're going to continue to have refugees as long as Syria looks like it does. And so what we need is a strategy, obviously, to give the refugees an opportunity to stay in their own country. With regard to vetting refugees, I would just mention a case a few years ago in my state. There was a person from Iraq who came into the U.S. as a refugee, vetted, who ended up being arrested for plotting a terrorist attack, and they subsequently found his fingerprints on an IED back in Iraq. So the ability to vet people coming from that part of the world is really quite limited. And so that's why I, for one, don't feel particularly comforted by the assertion that our government can vet these refugees, which leads to what you're hearing from all the governors around the country saying they're not interested in taking refugees from Syria for the foreseeable future. At the very least, it strikes me that we need a pause or a moratorium because the American people are quite concerned and upset about the possibility of terrorists coming into our country through some kind of refugee program. Let me turn to Senator Cornyn.
It strikes me the best solution to the refugee crisis in Syria and Iraq is for Syrians and Iraqis to be able to stay in their home country, which means that the root cause of this crisis is really the failure of the president to have any effective strategy to do what he says he wants to accomplish, which is to crush and destroy ISIS. But it's not just people coming from Syria to the United States that represents the threat. We have yet to hear a credible proposal from the president on how to deal with the homegrown radicalization of Americans, such as occurred at Fort Hood in 2009 and occurred in Garland, Texas just recently when two individuals that were radicalized online brought automatic weapons to Garland, Texas, and thanks to a good work by a security guard were basically stopped. But this is a growing threat, according to the FBI director, who said that they have open cases on homegrown potential ISIS threats in every field office in America, every FBI field office. So we need to hear a credible strategy from the president on how to deal with the crisis in Syria and Iraq, and also how to deal with the homegrown radicalism here in a way that keeps Americans safe.
And I think that what this points out is just the failure of the president's overall foreign policy. If you look at what's happening today, the withdrawal from Iraq opened the door for ISIS. Drawing the red line in Syria and not enforcing it has led to chaos in Syria. Just recently, the president was talking about bringing inmates from Guantanamo into the United States. All this is happening without a real plan on how to defeat ISIS. And so the president's suggestion that this is a JV squad or that this threat has been contained, I think is completely at odds with reality. And more recently, his description yesterday of this being a setback and somehow that he's got a strategy that he's going to stick with, I think too is completely divorced from reality. And so I hope that the president will come to his senses and realize that the United States has got to provide leadership. That leadership has been lacking. The reason I think a lot of these things are happening around the world today is because the president hasn't stepped up and provided leadership and put forward a plan and a strategy to defeat ISIS. And the events of this last weekend should be a very, very harsh reminder of the dangerous world in which we live and how critical and important American leadership is. And I think particularly now, the anxieties that the American people feel when they see this and worry about that possibility happening in this country makes it doubly important that we have a president that provides leadership. And we stand ready and willing to work with him if he will do that.
We all offer our sincere condolences to the people of Paris, and we are ready as Americans to stand by the people of France as the people of France have always stood by the people of America. What is very concerning is the president saying that ISIS is contained. What is Deidre Welsh, your phone is ringing. I don't know. What is concerning to so many of us is when the president says that that ISIS has been contained. What is concerning to so many of us is even after the attacks for the president's deputy national security advisor to say that there is no credible evidence of threat to the people of the United States. It is concerning when the president has for over a year said the greatest threat to the United States is that of climate change. And then during the presidential debates, the Democratic debates Saturday night, one of the presidential candidates said actually that climate change is the cause of increased global terrorism. The cause, climate change. So when you have a Russian airliner bombed out of the air, when you have the number of killings, deaths, the carnage in Paris, it is time for the president to move away from his focus on climate, which to me appears like a trivial pursuit. The president ought to be focused not on the upcoming Paris climate talks 2 weeks from now, but on the attacks that happened in Paris last week. Yet the president has promised $3 billion for his global climate, his green climate fund, $3 billion of U.S. hard-earned taxpayer dollars, and new regulations making it harder for us to have affordable energy in this country. Congress will weigh in on whatever comes out of the Paris climate talks and the money that the president has requested as part of his budget. Congress will have a say, and it's time for the president to start focusing on the concerns of the American people, which is their own safety, our own security, not what the president is focused on in terms of climate change.
Just one additional comment on Guantanamo. I'm told that the Attorney General today indicated that it would be against the law to transfer detainees from Guantanamo to the United States. I would recommend the President consult with his own Attorney General, particularly in the wake of articles we've seen that they're continuing to try to figure some way around the obvious prohibition that's been in the law for some time against transferring these detainees to the United States.
Senator, how quickly do you figure you all can get a bill for a pause in the Syrian refugee program, and do you think it's going to be tied to the big spending bill?
Well, the Speaker and I were talking about this yesterday. We're talking to the White House. We'll see what they're open to. There's certainly a possibility it could become part of legislation. I understand that the House may vote on a freestanding measure along these lines. You'll have to ask the Speaker's office about that. But it's pretty clear how the American people feel about this. I had a couple of governors calling me yesterday about it. Once they discovered that under the law they really don't have the authority to prevent these refugees from coming into their state. So there's broad concern about this. Noteworthy observation on that front, the Democratic governor of New Hampshire had the same view as well. So there's at least bipartisan concern about this flow of refugees coming into the country and what potential they may have to do us harm.
Leader McConnell.
Yeah.
On reconciliation, there's been some speculation that leadership might drop the defunding Planned Parenthood provision. Are you committed to keeping that Planned Parenthood provision in there?
Yeah, we're confident that the Obamacare repeal bill will include a defund of Obamacare, and we'll look forward to moving to that legislation after Thanksgiving.
Senator McConnell, you mentioned
Excuse me. Will contain a defund of Planned Parenthood in the Obamacare repeal bill, and we'll be moving to that. Thank you. We'll be moving to that after Thanksgiving.
Senator McConnell, you mentioned an Iraqi refugee who perhaps participated in manufacturing IEDs. There's been a certain amount of resurgence and interest over a bill that's been floating around here about whether people on terror watch lists should be able to legally buy guns in this country. Should they be able to? On the FBI terror watch list?
Yeah, I'm not particularly familiar with that.
Senator Feinstein has a bill, Mr. King in the House. There's
Anybody familiar with it?
I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the legislation, so I'll pass on it.
As far as the bill that Ted Poe put forth over in the House and was passed around July in regard to revoking passports of individuals who went to go fight for ISIS, it's right now in the upper chamber. Are you going to be bringing it up anytime soon to revoke the passport?
I'm having a hard time hearing your question. Is it if the House sends something over with regard?
I talked about the revoking of passports of individuals who have fought for ISIS
Revoking
over in Syria.
passports.
This is a House-passed bill.
It's a proposal.
Are you familiar with it?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, again, I'm not familiar with it. We'll take a look at it.
Senator McConnell, something that you may, that you were intimately familiar with when it was over here in the Senate. Senator Cotton just is introducing legislation to extend the sunset for the Patriot Act authorities that were being changed by the USA Freedom Act. Senator Rubio said last evening that there were concerns that effectively the people who supported the USA Freedom Act were taking tools away from the intelligence community. Is there any thought of revisiting any of that?
Well, I didn't support the bill that finally passed. Others did. But every time we have one of these attacks, I think it's appropriate to take a look at what the laws are on the books and be open to considering changing them if they don't reflect the modern threat. So we'll be looking at all of that to see how the law that we have on the books now adequately protects the American people. Thank you.